"Don't go down there," old Mrs. Miller from across the street said the day I moved in. She stood on the porch, clutching her cardigan as if a chill had swept through her bones. "Just leave it be." At first, I thought it was just small-town superstition, some silly folklore that kept the neighbors entertained. But the warnings didn't stop. The mailman mentioned it, the handyman refused to even go near the basement door, and even the cashier at the local grocery store muttered something cryptic about things that shouldn't be disturbed. It was ridiculous, I told myself, just an old basement. But their words gnawed at me. The first few days in the house were uneventful. I unpacked boxes, cleaned decades of dust from the furniture, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling that lingered in the back of my mind. The house creaked and groaned at night, but that was to be expected in a place this old. Still, the basement door seemed to watch me, standing at the end of the narrow hallway like a silent sentinel. On the fifth night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to see for myself what all the fuss was about. The door was old, with peeling paint and a rusted handle. I had to use some force to get it open, and when I did, a cold draft hit me, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. The wooden stairs spiraled down into the darkness, and even with my flashlight, I couldn't see the bottom. I hesitated for a moment, remembering the warnings, but curiosity won out. I descended the stairs slowly, each creak of the wood echoing in the stillness. The basement was bigger than I expected. The air was thick and cold, and the walls were lined with shelves crammed full of dusty jars and strange trinkets. At the far end of the room, I noticed a large wooden chest, its surface scratched and weathered with age. I felt drawn to it. Something about the chest seemed out of place, almost alive. My fingers trembled as I unlatched it and lifted the lid. Inside was nothing. Just a few scraps of paper and an old, broken pocket watch. Disappointed, I shut it and turned to leave. That's when I heard a faint scraping sound coming from behind me. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. Slowly, I turned back to face the chest. The lid was slightly ajar, even though I had just closed it. A chill ran down my spine. "Hello," I whispered, my voice trembling. No response. But the scraping sound continued, this time louder, and coming from the far corner of the basement. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to shift and move. "Okay, this is enough," I muttered, backing toward the stairs. But as I moved, I felt something underfoot, something soft and wet. I looked down to see a trail of dark liquid seeping from the far corner, pulling at my feet. My flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment, I saw it something crouched in the shadows, its long, spindly limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Its eyes glowed faintly, like dying embers, and its head tilted unnaturally as it stared at me. I stumbled backward, nearly falling up the stairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I slammed the door shut and locked it. For a moment, I stood there, panting, my back pressed against the door. It was just my imagination, I told myself, an overactive mind fueled by the eerie atmosphere and the town's ghost stories. But deep down, I knew better. That night, I dreamed of the basement. In my dream, the walls were alive, pulsating like flesh, and the chest in the corner whispered my name in a voice that wasn't human. I woke in a cold sweat, the sound of scraping still echoing in my ears. I told myself I wouldn't go back down there. Whatever was in that basement could stay there, but the house had other plans. The next day, I noticed small changes. Objects were out of place. Doors that I knew I had closed were open, and faint footprints appeared in the dust on the floor, footprints too large and misshapen to belong to any human. The warnings from the townsfolk suddenly felt more sinister. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were trying to save me. And I hadn't listened. The house won't let me leave. I should have packed up and left the next morning. Any sane person would have. But something about the house seemed to grip me, holding me in place like an unseen force. I told myself it was just stress, that I was imagining things. Still, I avoided the basement ... But the house didn't make that easy. The first sign came at dusk. I was sitting in the living room, trying to distract myself with a book. The old grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, its steady rhythm a backdrop to the uneasy quiet of the house. That's when I heard it again, the faint scraping sound. At first, I thought it was coming from the basement. But no, it was closer this time, just beneath the living room floor. I froze, my eyes darting to the floorboards. The scraping grew louder, more deliberate, like claws dragging across wood. The clock stopped ticking ... Then came the knock ... A slow, deliberate knock from beneath the floorboards, directly under my chair. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty house. No answer, just silence. I backed away, my eyes fixed on the floor. Then, as if mocking me, the knock came again, 3 sharp raps that sent a jolt of terror through my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the kitchen, clutching a knife and jumping at every creak and groan of the house. By the time dawn broke, I had made up my mind. I couldn't stay here. But leaving wasn't as simple as I thought. When I tried the front door, it wouldn't budge. The lock turned easily enough, but the door wouldn't open, as if something heavy was pressing against it from the other side. I tried the back door next, same thing. Panic set in. I checked every window, every possible exit, but none of them would open. It was as if the house itself had sealed me inside ... I called the locksmith. "There's something wrong with my doors," I explained, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. "I'll be there in an hour," he said. But an hour passed, then 2, and he never showed. When I tried calling him again, the line was dead. That's when I heard the footsteps. They started upstairs, slow and deliberate, each step creaking loudly on the old wooden floor. I wasn't alone, gripping the knife. I crept toward the staircase. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. The footsteps stopped. I waited, my heart pounding in the silence. Then, from the top of the stairs, I heard it, a low, guttural growl that didn't sound remotely human. My grip on the knife tightened as I backed away, my mind racing. I needed to get out of this house, no matter what. That's when I remembered the basement. The thought filled me with dread, but I had no choice. The windows and doors were sealed, and if there was any chance of finding another way out, it would be down there. Armed with my flashlight and the knife, I descended the creaking stairs once more. The air was colder than before, and the smell of decay was stronger. The basement seemed darker, the shadows deeper and more menacing. The chest was still in the corner, its lid closed this time. But the scraping sound was louder now, coming from a section of the far wall. I approached cautiously, my flashlight beam trembling. The wall looked ordinary at first glance, but then I noticed a small crack running down the center, as if the wall had been hastily sealed. The scraping was coming from behind it. Against my better judgment, I pressed my ear to the wall. My blood ran cold. There was something behind it, something moving. And then, it spoke. A voice, low and raspy, whispered my name. "David." I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The beam flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows across the walls. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the cold, damp air. The voice didn't answer. Instead, the chest creaked open. I turned just in time to see a hand, long and skeletal, with jagged claws emerge from the chest. The rest of it followed, unfolding like a grotesque spider. Its body was emaciated, its skin stretched taut over bones, and its eyes burned with a malevolent light. It moved toward me, its movements unnatural and jerky. I ran. Scrambling up the stairs, I slammed the basement door shut and locked it. But I knew it wouldn't hold for long. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't going to stay down there. As I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath, I heard it again, the voice. This time, it was coming from all around me, whispering my name in a chilling chorus. "David, you can't leave." The house was alive, and it wanted me to stay. "If you're as hooked as I am, Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for the final, bone-chilling conclusion. What do you think is lurking behind those walls? Drop your theories in the comments below, I'd love to hear them. And remember, the scariest secrets are often the ones we refuse to listen to. Stay tuned, because it's only going to get darker from here. The truth beneath the floorboards, the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more insistent, filling every corner of the house. My name echoed from the walls, the floors, even the air itself. The thing from the basement wasn't confined anymore, it was everywhere. I barricaded the basement door with whatever furniture I could find, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't just a house, it was a trap. By nightfall, I was desperate. My phone had no signal. My calls for help went unanswered, and every attempt to escape ended in failure. The whispers became laughter, mocking, cruel laughter that seemed to come from the shadows. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was my reflection in the window. But when I moved, it didn't. It stood there, staring at me with hollow eyes, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. "Leave me alone," I screamed, hurling a vase at the window. The glass shattered, but the figure was gone, but the laughter remained. I couldn't sit idle anymore. If I was going to survive, I had to understand what this thing was and why it was tormenting me. I started tearing through the house, searching for clues. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, I found an old trunk filled with my grandmother's belongings. Most of it was harmless clothes, letters, photographs. But at the bottom of the trunk was a journal, its leather cover worn and cracked with age. I opened it, my hands trembling. The entries started innocently enough: daily musings, recipes, notes about the weather. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone changed. My grandmother wrote about the basement, about how she'd heard noises coming from below and seen strange figures in the shadows. Then came the most chilling entry: "The deal has been struck. It will stay below, as long as it is fed. But if the chain is broken, it will come for us all." My blood turned to ice. The journal didn't explain what it was, but I didn't need an explanation. I already knew. The barricade at the basement door was useless. I heard it collapse in the middle of the night, the furniture scraping across the floor as if flung aside by an invisible hand. I grabbed the knife and my flashlight and hid in the kitchen, my back pressed against the pantry door. The house was deathly silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Then the footsteps started again, slow, deliberate, heavier than before. They weren't just coming from the basement now, they were on the stairs, then the hallway, then just outside the kitchen door. The doorknob turned, slowly. "David." The voice wasn't coming from the door anymore, it was behind me. I spun around, the flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. The pantry door was wide open, and inside was a gaping hole in the floor, leading into the black void beneath the house. The whispers rose to a deafening crescendo. A force slammed into me, knocking the flashlight from my hand and plunging the room into darkness. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I woke up, I was back in the basement, lying on the cold, damp floor. The chest was gone, replaced by a large, circular stone embedded in the ground. Symbols I didn't recognize were carved into its surface, glowing faintly, and standing over it was the creature. Its twisted body loomed over the stone, its clawed hands tracing the symbols. Its eyes burned brighter than before, and when it looked at me, I felt an overwhelming wave of despair. It spoke, but not in words. Its voice echoed in my mind, filling it with images of my grandmother, of the townsfolk, of countless others who had lived in this house and been lured to this very spot. "You broke the chain." I realized the truth then. My grandmother had made some kind of pact with this thing, keeping it confined in exchange for what? Safety? Longevity? Whatever the deal was, it was over now, and I had unleashed it. I didn't have a plan. I only had the knife, and a desperate will to survive. The creature lunged at me, its claws slashing through the air. I rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding it, and plunged the knife into the glowing stone. The basement shook violently, the symbols flaring with a blinding light. The creature let out an ear-piercing shriek, its body convulsing as the stone cracked beneath my knife. For a moment, everything was still. Then the stone shattered, and the creature dissolved into a cloud of black smoke, which was sucked into the cracks in the floor. When I emerged from the basement, the house was different. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight gone. The doors and windows opened easily, and the whispers were gone. I didn't stay long. I packed a bag and left, never looking back. The house still stands, empty and silent. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right, the townsfolk say they can hear faint whispers coming from the basement. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. What do you think really happened in that house? Was it over? Or is something still lurking? Let me know your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to uncover more chilling tales. Remember, the scariest warnings are the ones we don't heed. Stay curious, and stay safe.